Every camera has an auto setting, but what sets your photography apart from average? Auto can be good for the beginner. If you want to sharpen your skills behind the camera, however, you must have a basic understanding of the fundamentals of photography. And the first step is being able to navigate the manual setting. Most professional cameras have a dial with several modes displayed ranging from auto to manual. If you're like me, when I started out, manual was intimidating because that left the results 100% up to me. It doesn't have to be intimidating though. With a basic understanding and patience, manual will be your new best friend. Why venture out and use manual? Because many times the auto setting cannot adapt better than the human eye can. God created your eyes to adjust perfectly to your surroundings. Manual unlocks the control you need to adjust the camera settings to maximize those results. Manual is built on three basic cornerstones: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Let's go over those three things. Let's start with ISO. All three of these main settings control light in various ways, but ISO particularly controls how sensitive your camera is to light. In very basic terms, ISO is simply a camera setting that will brighten or darken your image. When you raise your ISO number, your image will get brighter. So say you're out trying to take a photo in your church auditorium, but the image is really dark. The first setting I would adjust is my ISO. Similarly, if I was outside during the day and my image was too bright, I would lower my ISO number. Sounds simple, but there are a few things you should keep in mind when deciding to raise or lower your ISO. First, your image is not magically gaining more light. The sensor inside the camera is simply amplifying what is already there. It's becoming more sensitive. However, the higher the ISO number, the more you will begin to see grain or noise in the image. And you'll also notice some of the colors breaking down. Every camera has a lens, and that lens is different, but test your camera and lens to see what its limits are, and use a general rule: stay away from high ISO numbers. Aperture is another important setting that, if understood and used correctly, can really make your images pop. Aperture is simply the opening in your lens that controls the amount of light exposed to the camera sensor. This setting isn't just about light though. The overall image will get brighter the wider you open the iris, but another change that occurs is in your depth of field. Now, depth of field is how much of the image is in focus. For example, if I were taking a picture of my Bible and I wanted my Bible to be in focus, but everything behind it blurred out, then I would need to adjust my aperture setting. Aperture is measured in f-stops and are usually labeled f1.7, f2.8, etc. The lower the f-stop number, the larger the opening in the lens, the more light that is let in, and the more shallow your depth of field gets, meaning your focus area gets more narrow and everything else gets more blurry. If I wanted to take a picture where everything was in focus, then I would need to raise the f-stops. This would limit the iris opening and make my overall image darker because of the less light being let through to the sensor. This can get confusing since the smaller the f-stop number is, the wider the iris opening gets. Last but not least is shutter speed. Shutter speed is the setting that controls, yep, you guessed it, light. In front of the sensor in every camera, there's a curtain that opens and closes. Shutter speed is the length of time that the camera shutter is open, exposing light onto the camera sensor. Essentially, it's how long your camera spends taking a photo. This has a few important effects in how your images will appear. A fast shutter time allows the sensor to capture the image quickly without any motion blur. This results in an image that is sharp or frozen in place. A slower shutter time causes that shutter over the sensor to open for a longer period of time, and so capturing more movement. This can cause some unwanted effects if you don't pay close attention. You'll need to gauge your shutter speed on the movement of your shot. If you're taking a picture of someone smiling, you can have slower shutter speeds. If you're taking a picture of your pastor preaching as he jumps, waves his hands, and shouts, you'll need a faster shutter speed. Another thing that you should keep in mind is that the longer the shutter is open, the more light it takes in, and so the more exposed your image will be. The shorter the shutter is open, the less light you'll get and the darker your photo will be. Shutter speeds are typically measured in fractions of a second. For example, 1/4 means 1/4 of a second, while 1/100 means 1/100th of a second. The ISO, aperture, and shutter speed settings can usually be adjusted with a dial or a button on your camera. Each one of these settings does something unique for your image. However, each setting controls light in a different way. To properly expose your shot, you will need to move several settings while still trying to achieve the look you want. Don't just change one setting to get it bright enough or dark enough, because you'll quickly run into issues. Using the manual mode requires patience and practice, but don't give up. Anyone can take pictures on auto, but you're a pro and you can do so much better. Thanks for watching.